Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you. It's the top of a new month, a new season, which of course means it's time for yet another one of our tier lists. So, as always as ever, we're going to be grouping these decks here. I've got 25 picked out this time. 25 of the most played decks currently in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So, we're dropping these decks in one of 4 tiers, descending from tier 1 to 2, then 3, and then Rogue. So, a couple of quick disclaimers. For one, I have picked these 25 decks in particular because these are, as I said before, according to Untapped, the 25 most played decks in Master Duel Ladder in Diamond and Master Rank. So, what does that mean? That means if you like a deck that is not featured here, that does not mean it is worse than Rogue. That does not mean I think it's bad. That does not mean I excluded it because I hate you. It simply means it is not one of the 25 most popular decks in Master Duel. I explain this literally every single tier list, and that does not stop me getting from multiple comments about like, where's my favorite deck? So hopefully we have covered our bases here. Another disclaimer about the Rogue tier, since some people seem to conflate me putting a deck in Rogue to me calling a deck bad. Decks in Rogue are not bad, far from it. I think any deck that is in Rogue tier is one that is capable of sneaking into Master or even Master 1 or even topping a tournament. It would just take a more dedicated pilot because the deck is a lower power level. So Rogue does not equal bad. In fact, Rogue equals good, just not as good as, everything else. And as always ever, if you have, your own thoughts about the tier list, I very highly encourage you to leave those in the comments section below, as long as we are not being rude. Discourse is awesome, rudeness is not, so. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and start dropping some of these decks in some tiers. Kashira, yeah, you know what? I did this last season, and I'm absolutely going to do it again here, too. I'm putting Kashira in Rogue. I know I had more than one person say in the last tier list when I did this, like, how could Kashira possibly be Rogue? If they summon a Rise Heart, you're just screwed. And it's like, well, yeah, if a lot of Rogue decks get their combo off, you're just screwed. Also, like, a deck being annoying and a deck being powerful are definitely two entirely different things that in specifically the realm of Yu-Gi-Oh! I noticed get confused a lot. So I really don't think Kashira is that powerful of a deck. I mean, it's got the same weaknesses it's always had, right? It doesn't put up negates, meaning it's vulnerable to pretty much every form of disruption. And even if you don't have like a hand trap that can stop them, literally any board breaker will do it. I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. You can smash and ground a Rise Heart. It's that vulnerable to destruction. So, yeah, a deck that's still solid, but pure Kashira I really don't think is a tier to deck. I cannot justify calling it one moving forward. Floowandereeze, while probably an equally hated deck, I'm not a big fan of Floowandereeze myself, but this one I do think is at least a little more powerful than Kashira. I'm actually kind of debating putting this at the bottom of tier 3, but I'm going to leave it at the top of Rogue for now. I think if they got back to Empen, then I definitely think we could call Floowandereeze a tier 3 deck. And if they put the map back to 3, then I think we might even look at Floowandereeze being like a lower tier 2 deck possibly, right? Now, even though I really don't like playing against Flu, and Empen is my least favorite part of the deck, I really don't think Empen should be at 1. I really don't even think Map should be at 1. Map is at 3 in both the TCG and OCG, if I recall correctly, and Floowandereeze does exactly nothing in either of those formats, nor has it. Well, that's not true for TCG, actually. Floowandereeze does still put up some pretty decent TCG showings, but OCG, we just have not seen it at all. I mean, especially with the Molcharmies coming out, the fact that, like, Molcharmy Perulia is an out to, Floowandereeze means that they are going to be susceptible to their own form of Max C moving forward, which, while might not be commonly played, is still something to consider as far as, like, them getting weaker as a deck moving forward. So, because there are some people that say, oh, it makes sense for Empen and Map to be at 1 in a Max C format, and that's just not true at all. Again, we see the OCG, which is very much a Max C format, did put the never limited Empen and did put the map up to 3. So, yeah. We'll call Flu Rogue for now. Monkonko is absolutely tiered. I'm going to put it in tier 3, and although I tend to put it in, like, lower tier 3, the addition of Ken and Gen have actually been a significant power boost for Makonko. This is one of those ones where, kind of like how with Flandreese, I was like upper rogue, but maybe lower tier 3. I almost want to put this at the bottom of tier 2, but I really don't think Makonko is quite that good. So I'm going to put Makonko in tier 3, and yeah, I think that's a pretty good spot for it. So Pearly. So in very, very recent history, Pearly has actually been one of the consistently most highest rated win rate decks on Ranked Ladder. Now, high win rate doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best deck. It just means that the people who are playing it are very good pilots. Well, not necessarily. It could also be indicative of deck power level, but you always have to consider a balance between the two. Usually, if a deck's popularity is low, but its win rate is high, it's, dedicated pilots doing well with it. If a deck's popularity and win rate are high, then it's just a really good deck. For Pearly, it's the former, not the latter. I'm going to put Pearly in tier 2. I cannot make an argument for this deck being tier 1. I was debating for a second if I wanted to put it in tier 3, but I would only put it in tier 3, I think, if I was really considering popularity over power level. One thing I like to do when making these tier lists is to sort of gauge both the deck's popularity and power level and kind of factor both in when putting a deck in a tier slot. I tend to value power level a little higher than popularity as a metric for basing how good a deck is. I mean, would think would be obvious reasons, but popularity is still something that needs to be considered, right? But yeah, Pearly I think is a pretty firmly tier 2 deck either way, no matter how you cut it. Goblin Bikers. So Goblin Biker variants have been decently popular. This would, of course, be because they were part of the... Actually, technically not the latest selection pack. That was the one with Hallow and Ween in it. But, of course, the latest main, quote-unquote, selection pack that featured Goblin Bikers as well as Tenpai and Ritual Beast. Yep. So, that said, Goblin Bikers, I do think, are a pretty firmly rogue deck. I think I will put them below Flu and Kashira, which might seem obvious, but... it's really not. I think there is an argument that Goblin Biker variants are actually better than pure Kashira, and I just know there are some people who will guffaw at that. I don't necessarily think that's true, but if somebody made that argument, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with them either. Yeah, I'm going to put Goblin Biker just here in Rogue. Runic variants coming up after that. I'm trying to think of what Runic variants I've seen lately. Runic variants actually did get a nice little power boost from, or at least non-stun variants did get a nice little power boost from, the Metamorph. It's like the Metamorph card, but it's sacking a fusion or a synchro to summon one from main deck. It just came out. Runic Generator, Runic Sprite, lots of Runic variants get a nice little buff from that. Still gonna put Runic in Rogue. I'll put it above Goblin Biker, though. Not really much Runic Stun. I really don't think that, Runic Stun is the most optimal way to play Stun right now. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fine. So, Paleo. I'm probably just going to continue this trend of putting Paleo at the bottom of Rogue. It's that deck that's I don't know. Okay, yeah, no. Let me actually think about this for a second. Let me actually stop and consider this, because I think Paleo is better than Goblin Biker variants. Paleo is actually probably better than Runic variants right now, too. You know what? Ooh, excuse me. Ooh. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so I was about to say, oh, Paleo, I'm just going to keep putting it at the bottom of Rogue because I don't think it's that good of a deck, but I think that is way too dismissive, and I'm glad I caught myself before I just left it down there. Because, yeah, I mean, after thinking about it for just even another few seconds, I do think that Paleo decks are probably stronger than Runic variants right now, and almost assuredly Goblin Biker. But what does that say for Kashira if I wanted to say Goblin Biker was stronger than Cash? I don't know if I actually think that. I think that might have been a little bit... I might have been speaking in hyperbole a little bit there, but I think I'll leave Paleo here. Yeah, Paleo does actually have quite a few variants too, and that's something that I've definitely failed to respect in the past as well. Especially I've been seeing a lot of people lately on the lab build, and then there's also the Junk Collector. That's what that card's called. There's the Junk Collector tech as well. So a lot of different ways to play the deck. And I do think it is quite good. I mean, again, any deck in Rogue, I think, like I said, can definitely get into Master and or top a tournament with the right pilot. And I think that definitely fits for Paleo. So, yeah, we'll just put it here in Rogue, mid-Rogue so far. Sword Soul. Sword Soul, Sword Soul, Sword Soul. I'm going to put it in Rogue, of course, but I think I'll put it a little bit above Paleo, but below Kashtira. I don't know. What can I say about Sword Soul that I haven't already said in, like, the other 2 years of tier list as it's, like, slowly slipped down from tier 1 to Rogue. But we've already lamented that plenty of times in the past. Yeah, I think Sword Soul, you know. It's a bit of a shame that, like, this archetype just has not gotten any follow-up support. We're at the point where I think it could... I mean, it doesn't need, like, a really good card, but it could use, like, an at least decent card to kind of help boost its power level a bit. But, yeah, I think it's fine to just leave it in Rogue. Tearlaments. Definitely gonna put in tier 2, and I want to put them, I think, at the top of tier 2. Well, there might be another deck that goes above it, actually, now that I think about it. But, Tearlaments have maintained their status as a just very solid deck in the current Master Duel meta. We did see a Pearl the Rhino ban, but that is more to hit pile decks that are trying to use particularly the Rainbow Bridge to search it and go into a tier engine. So the Pearl the Rhino ban to tier limit itself, like dedicated tier limit decks, has not been a significant hit from what I've seen and, you know, experienced myself. So yeah, definitely, it's interesting because, like, and I think this is a sign that, and this has been the case, but, like, the sign that power level wise, I think we're in a relatively healthy format is the fact that, like tier limit has existed in this capacity for so long and been a solid tier 2 deck for so long, and, like, doesn't really feel over the top. I know there are some people who want Kickless banned. I still think that's frankly just absolutely absurd to want that. Yeah, no, it's fine. We can, like, I don't know, because, like, there's always the argument, and I really think that this is, like, not a good argument. People will make the argument of, like, oh, why hit a bunch of cards when you could ban one? So the argument here is people saying, like, just ban Kick Close, and then Merly and Pearl Rhino and Soliak can all come back, and it's like, I think that's extremely... I like to call that level 1 thinking. It's like, why hit many card when one card do, you know? Is, like, the argument. But, like, if you, like, you know, apply a bit of nuance, which Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are not good at doing when it comes to evaluating cards and metas and decks, but if you apply a little bit of nuance to the situation, I really do think the iteration of tier limits that we get with Kickless Legal and stuff like Merly Band and Soliak Limited and all that fun stuff, and, like, Tier Cash too, is better than if we had just banned Kick Close. I mean, from a pure, like, deck building design standpoint, that's something that I personally really value, right? And when I look at the TCG and I look at the state of tier limits in the TCG, it's just, like, pathetic. Like, from both a power level standpoint and a, you know, exploring this deck's design space perspective, right? The deck just does not do nearly enough, in my opinion, and it doesn't really perform either. I think that it's worth it to hit more cards instead of just one in certain situations to keep a deck more interesting. And I think that's absolutely been done very well with Tier Elements in Master Duel. So again, why hit many card when one card do? I don't see that as, like, a valid argument in and of itself. Let's say that's the thing that happens a lot in these Yu-Gi-Oh! Debates. Is, like, people will apply these, like, very general terms to a very, like, specific argument. Like, you know, just, yeah, saying, like, okay, why should we ban Kick Close and unhit everything else? And again, people will say, well, because why keep one card banned? It's like, okay, no, but don't just say that. Tell me the reason, right? And that's where people always falter. Like, I don't know, on social media, when I get in kind of these back and forths, that's always where I, like, you know, well, I guess, for lack of a better word, challenge people. When they assert a notion like that, that's a generalist term, I like to say, like, okay, no, that I see your generalist term, but tell me specifically how it applies here. And yeah, most of the time people just don't even respond, or just like, well, how can you not see how it applies? And I'm just like, no, but tell me. It's like, I don't know. A lot of the time I think people kind of rely on the other person, like, forming their argument in their head, when it's like, no, I want you to explain the situation to me. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent here, so moving on. Ritual Beast. So this is a deck that I desperately need more experience both with and against. A lot of people seem to be really up on it. Like, from my very, very brief experience playing both with and against this deck, I would call this upper tier 3, like maybe the bottom of tier 2, but I've also seen other people saying it's like a definite, like, tier 2 deck. I don't know. it's just, it's so hard to pin for me because I just have so little experience with it. I'm not going to lie to you all, I actually do regret crafting Ritual Beast stuff because given how complicated of a deck it is, I gotta level with you all. I'm probably not going to put in the time to really learn it super well. I'm not saying I'll never play the deck again, but the idea of spending a few hours to really learn Ritual Beast and get it down pat just does not sound like fun at all to me. I gotta be honest with you. So, definitely take this one with a grain of salt. I would absolutely entertain arguments that Ritual Beast is in tier 2, because I'm really just not that knowledgeable on the deck, but... Centurion, I'm gonna put in tier 2. I'll put it above Pearly. I think Centurion's really... I mean, it surprised me, honestly, in terms of his power level. I think it surprised a number of people, you know, who... I mean, I thought it was gonna be the first month that Centurion was out. I put it in, like, mid-rogue. And I was like, yeah, I think this is where the deck's gonna end up. But, I mean, as the months have gone on, it's just crept up from mid-rogue up to tier 3. And then now, I think we're all pretty comfortable calling Centurion a tier 2 deck. So, yeah, I mean, it's always interesting, like, when cards first come out, and how we can misevaluate them in the meta, right? Because with Master Duel especially, it's not like these are brand new cards that we've never seen before. Everyone knew what Centurion was all about when it came into Master Duel, but the meta is so unique, and specifically the best of one format is also very unique in what it incentivizes, that it actually ended up Centurion, allowing Centurion the opportunity to really flourish. And it is also just inherently a pretty good deck, so... I've seen a lot of people call Centurion the new Sword Soul, and I definitely understand that. I even agree with it, I think. That in terms of, like, just a non-explosive, synchro combo deck that, you know, doesn't, like, put, 3 negates on the end board, but still has a lot of interaction. Like, yeah, I think that's pretty solid. I know a lot of people would call that deck mid-range, but, I mean, I've said my piece on that before. So... Fire King Snake Eye. Although, okay, so this is actually a great example of why popularity alone does not dictate... Well, is it? I don't know, because here's the thing, right? I just have not seen very many people playing this deck, particularly since Poplar went to 1. But I don't think the deck is bad. In fact, I think it's definitely still a tier 1 deck in terms of power level. Excuse me, but in terms of, again, just the number of people actually, like, playing it, Fire King Snake Eye is kind of at an all-time low right now. But it's not hard to see why. Like, even before Poplar went to 1, I think the play rate of Fire King Snake Eye was around, like, 6%, while the play rate of, like, stuff like Centurion and Tearlament was, like, 10 to 12. You know, Yubel was in the teens, if not 20s. And again, this was at a time when a lot of people would have called Fire King Snake Eye the best deck, and I wouldn't have necessarily disagreed. Now, I think Yubel is probably just at least a little bit stronger, but the fact of the matter remains that, like, just because you don't see people playing Fire King Snake Eye doesn't mean it's suddenly a bad deck, and that applies to literally every single deck. Like I said, being able to notice the difference between power level and popularity is a very, very important skill to have when it comes to evaluating, you know, a deck standing in the meta. So I think Fire King Snake Eye is a tier 1 deck. I don't think it's the best deck of the format, and I would entertain an argument that it's like the top of tier 2 now that Poplar is at 1. But I would really, I'd really just see because I've played with this deck a couple of times since the limit. I want to play with it. I want to see how it feels to try to open hands consistently with only 1 Poplar before I'm willing to call this a tier 2 deck. But yeah, I think that is fine leaving it at tier 1. I don't think many people would disagree. Voiceless Voice has actually proven to be another one of those decks like Centurion that I slept on pretty hard, that I thought was going to be tier 3 if not rogue, but I am perfectly willing to call a tier 2 deck. And the thing is too, that Voiceless Voice has a lot more staying power as a strong meta deck than I realized, as Voiceless Voice builds that are, you know, with the exception of, like, maybe Mulch Armies, like, currently Master Duel Legal are actually topping the OCG right now, meaning that Voiceless Voice doesn't need any future support to stay meta-relevant, which is very, very nice. So, alright. Speaking of, you know, thinking about Fire King Snake Eye, Rescue Ace here. So, I think I'm at a point, because I actually have played against Rescue Ace a couple of times recently. I think I'm at a point where I'm willing to say that Rescue Ace is not necessarily, like, one of the strongest decks in the room. I guess, what am I trying to say here? I think that, because in the past I've said that Rescue Ace is underplayed. I think it is still underplayed. And in that regard, I am still willing to call it a tier 2 deck. But in the past, I've put it towards like the top of tier 2 and been like, this is debatably a tier 1 deck, but nobody plays it. But I honestly do kind of feel like the power level of Rescue Ace is starting to fall off. Am I willing to call it worse than Voiceless Voice? I think so. Is it worse than Pearly? I think so as well. So I think I am going to put Rescue Ace down here. Yeah, my opinion on it lately has just, like, shifted in a not great way. Plus, like, I don't know. Yeah, the 4 back row are annoying, but, like, and maybe this is my own personal bias coloring things a bit, but, like, I personally, in a lot of decks I play, don't really have the most trouble playing through Rescue Ace back row a lot of the time. It feels kind of 50-50. It feels more hand dependent for me whether or not I can make plays if I go second against Rescue Ace than it is up to their back row, right? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, the Turbulence set 4, even with an SP up, just really does not feel as threatening as it used to, you know? So, I mean, I still think Rescue Ace is a fine deck, but I'm going to put it here towards the bottom of tier 2 for now. Okay, Tenpai. This is the big one. You're probably all wondering where I'm going to put Tenpai, and I'm not going to lie, there's even a part of me that's still wondering that myself. Alright, here's what I think I'm going to do, because you cannot deny the popularity of this deck. I mean, in Diamond and Master Rank Ladder alone, you know, Tenpai saw, like, above 30% play. That is actually encroaching on where Tearlaments used to see play, and the level of play that Tearlaments saw, you know, when it was big. Does that mean Tenpai is a tier 0 deck? I don't think so. You know, this season, I, of course, have had a lot of experience playing against it, but I've also played with it a fair bit, too. I'm going to put Tenpai in tier 1, but I am going to put it at the bottom of tier 1. And because I've said this in the past, right, that I think Tenpai and Master Duel could debatably be a tier 2 deck right now. And I still think that's probably very likely the case, although I think just, again, due to how overwhelmingly popular it is, that's why I'm going to bring it up to tier 1. I know I said before, and this is still true, that I like to let power level dictate more than popularity where a deck ends up on the tier list. But with a popularity rating as high as Tenpai is, like, I cannot ignore that. So the fact of the matter remains, you have to, at least to some degree, plan for Tenpai in this meta, right? Because on average, at least 1 in 5 of your games are going to be against Tenpai. So for its presence alone, if nothing else, I'll put it in tier 1. In terms of its power level, I think it might actually be a lower tier 1 deck, but I also suspect it might be a tier 2 deck. Sprite, you know, I would have put Sprite in tier 3 again, despite the fact that they lost a Beckoning Beast and Nightmare Throne. I still think the deck is quite solid. Of course, the Adventure variants got helped out by Water Enchantress going to 3, so Sprite is still in a state where I think it is a pretty good game plan, honestly. I don't really know that I have much more to say about that. Wow, that's surprisingly short for me as far as what I have to say about Sprite. So, Stun has taken a lot of hits recently, hasn't it? I'm going to put it, I'm just going to put it at the bottom. Like, 1, I don't think many people will argue against that. 2, like, I actually do think Stun is, like, worse than Goblin Biker right now. Before it got the latest round of hits, like, I would have argued that Stun would have maybe been, like, more mid-rogue. And I have put it up there in recent tier lists, but I will say that I have noticed a decline in the number of Stun decks I've been facing, personally, since they received their latest wave of hits. So I think the power level of it has dropped as well as the popularity. I'm going to bump it down to the bottom of Rogue. Again, I don't think many people will mind seeing Stun being at the bottom of this tier list either. So, Yubel, I am going to put in tier 1 to probably nobody's surprised, and I think it is going to end up at the top of tier 1. Even though, again, it did have those semi-limits, Dark Beckoning Beast and Nightmare Throne as mentioned, but also Phantom of Yubel, I don't think that significantly affects what the deck is capable of. And on top of that, the deck actually did get a buff in the actual most recent selection pack with the Errata to Summon Sorceress is actually really good in current Yubel, because you really don't care if you get Fiend locked. And the Summon Sorceress lets you turn a Dark Beckoning Beast into an actual full Yubel combo line. whereas it couldn't do that before. So, also looking at the Horizons, Verodros is somehow still not in Master Duel. That is the generic rank 10 with an Omni Negate, so you better believe Yubel is going to be on that. I think Konami is probably looking to hit Yubel again before they bring out Verodros into the game, but we'll have to see how it actually ends up playing out. Either way, again, I really don't think it is a stretch for a lot of people if I call Yubel currently the top of Tier 1, currently the best deck of Master Duel. You know, debatably, I think for Tier 1, you could also argue for this placement. I think I might even leave it at that, actually. Because now that I think about it... When I'm thinking about... No, yeah, I'm going to leave Tenpai down here. I think it's really close, Fire King, Snake Eye, and Tenpai in terms of their current power level. But I'm going to leave it like this, I think. Super Heavy Samurai and its variants have barely been hanging on as one of the more... I guess more top 25 popular decks, but let's see. I will say this about this deck and others like it, like big super heavy combo decks. Well, not super heavy combo decks. You know, Synchron would apply to this as well, and stuff like those tier limit piles, right? This is actually not a bad time to be playing like big wombo combo decks like this current meta. Because of Tenpai's prevalence, you are more likely in this meta than probably any other to go first, right? Which again really incentivizes those big combo decks that want to use their turn 1 to put like 3 or 4 negates on the board, right? That said, I am still going to put Super Heavy in Rogue. I'll put it... I'll put it like here between Sword Soul and Paleo. I think that's a decent spot for it. You could argue Paleo is a little bit better, but I think you're splitting hairs at that point. Let's see. So next up we have Branded. It's going to go in Tier 2, and I think, yeah, this is actually a good spot for it. And you know what? While I'm at it, I'm just going to throw Lab up here as well. Like, again, Lab, it's actually a pretty good time to be Lab. With so much Tenpai running around, Lab actually has a pretty solid matchup for the ability to set a bunch of cards first. Although, really, you know, a lot of us have experienced Labs playing on our turn 1 as well. So, a lot of the time, they don't even necessarily need to win the coin flip to set up. But they do like winning the coin flip, of course. And then, Branded is Branded is Branded is Branded, keeping its permanent residence in the middle of Tier 2. Not much has changed about the deck, but not much really needs to, I don't think. So, Pure Snake Eye, as represented by Ash here. Like, I just have to put this at the bottom of Tier 3, right? Like, the only reason Pure Snake Eye is even here, honestly, I think, is because Master Duel kind of lumps Fire King Snake Eye and Pure Snake Eye variants in the same category. I mean, I'm thinking about the fact that Poplar is at 1 now, especially. I don't know. I don't think Pure Snake Eye... Like, part of me almost wants to put it down near Sword Soul. I actually think Sword Soul's a little high on this tier list, if I'm not going to lie. I put it more, like, down there. Yeah, I wanted to put Pure Snake Eye down here, and I'll probably end up putting it there, like, next season. I'm willing to let at least one more month play out and see how much this actually drops off in terms of popularity. But, like, if I really think about it, like... There's like no reason to play Pure Snake Eye and Master Duel right now, right? Ash is at 1, Poplar's at 1, we don't have Azamina, we don't have the Snake Eye Diabell Star. There's just a lot of stuff that we don't have, for one. On top of that, the stuff that we do have is hit pretty severely. It's warranted, of course. Like, of course Snake Eye does deserve these hits, but it's funny how much the Fire King engine really does help it out. And I mean, that's the thing too, when you play Fire King Snake Eye, and let's be real, this has always been the case, but people just like to pretend that Fire King Snake Eye is like the exact same as Pure Snake Eye, but like, Fire King Snake Eye really is mostly a Fire King deck in terms of the plays you prioritize, and then sometimes you also do Snake Eye stuff, and I think that's why we see Fire King Snake Eye like still, you know, doing so well relatively, and then Pure Snake Eye just continuing to fall off, right? You know, I gotta say it again. There's just really, at this point in time, there is really not a reason to be playing Pure Snake Eye. There just isn't. There's no incentive to do it. Dragon Link has actually kind of fallen off from what I can tell, which I was a little surprised by, in popularity at least, because I knew a lot of people were excited for that deck to come back. But in terms of power level, I think it's a very solid tier 3 deck. I'll put it here towards the bottom, but definitely still above Snake Eye. It's pretty comparable with like Sprite and Makonko. I think these are all about roughly the same power level. So if you want to shuffle these around, like put Sprite on the bottom or D-Link on top, I wouldn't argue against that for these 3 decks in particular. So Mathmech, I am going to continue to call a tier 2 deck, and I think even if not for the fact that Terahertz was so good against Tenpai, it would still be a tier 2 deck. People have been sleeping on Mathmech, I think, for a little bit now, but in this meta in particular, you know, Mathmech in the past I'd put towards the bottom of tier 2, but it's definitely moving up because of its good matchup against Tenpai. For those who don't know, Neo Tempest Terahertz, the big Link 5 that Mathmech always ends on, and also OTKs with, negates any of your opponent's activated monster effects during the battle phase. So, like, as long as you can stick the Terahertz and it lives through to the opponent's battle phase, it is a floodgate against Tenpai. Yeah, of course, very, very good in this meta as a result of that. But again, even if not for the specific meta advantages, I do still think Mathmech would be a tier 2 deck. And finally, Rika Sun Avalon. I am going to put it in tier 3. I think it is pretty comparable to stuff like Sprite, like D-Link. You know, if I'm being really honest about it, it's probably more like this, but middle of tier 3, I think it's pretty comparable. The Ragnaraka cards have had at least somewhat of a buff for the deck, I've noticed, and not only that, but also the new Aroma Link monster as well, and the main deck, they got a main deck monster too, so plant variants are definitely living fairly good in Master Duel right now. So there is my tier list for the top 25 most popular, most played decks currently in Master Duel. I think this is a pretty solid... Yeah, I'm satisfied. I'm looking at everything's placement. I don't want to shuffle anything around. I'm pretty satisfied with where everything's at. But what do you think? Definitely do let me know. Again, like I said, as long as we're not introducing rudeness, I definitely do value hearing your side and hearing your opinions. So would definitely appreciate that. But that's going to do it for this one. So thanks everyone for watching, or if you just scrolled to the very end to see where I put everything. Nevertheless, I really do want to thank you for clicking on the video and checking it out. The support in any way, shape, and form really does mean a lot. So that's going to do it for this one. Let us move now to our outro. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Just want to give you a huge thanks for watching all the way to the very end of the video. Believe it or not, that is actually one of the best ways that you can support the channel, is by watching the videos in their entirety. But there are many ways in which you can support the channel if you are so interested. The names that you're seeing on screen here, I gotta give an extra special thanks to, because these are people who have chosen to either become a member on YouTube, which if you're interested you can do as well via the join button next to the subscribe button down there, or have signed up over on Patreon and become members there. Link to that is going to be in the description below. Without the support that is being offered by, again, all the people that you're seeing on screen right here, I would not be able to take the time to dedicate to uploading daily YouTube videos. So thank you so very much. But there are also other ways you can support as well. Again, link to the description below. If you like my deck tracker that you'll see in a lot of my videos, the Untapped Companion, you can download that for free, and if you use my affiliate link down there, then that also goes a long way towards supporting the channel. That's, again, free. So is subscribing here on YouTube. That's also free and a huge way to support. You can also check out Twitch, once again linked in the description below. Following and subscribing over there will not only support as well, but also give you notifications of when I go live if you want to catch some of the live streams. But really, no matter how you choose to support, it all adds up, and it all definitely means the world. So thank you, each and every one of you. For now, this is Hexlex. I'm going to be signing out, but more than that, I'm hoping that you have a fantastic day.